Created in 2008 by 5 conservatory students in the urban center of Almaty, Kazakhstan. Thank you. The ethno-folk ensemble Turan offers a compelling case study for examining the contemporary practice, presentation, and significance of Kazakh traditional music. Although they are widely perceived and often promoted as traditional, the ensemble actually embodies a much more complicated picture of Kazakh cultural history through their visual and musical approach to performance. In this paper, I will talk about the multiple cultural layers that inform Turan's musical and visual style, how their contemporary presentation of an ancient image has helped to propel them into the international spotlight, and what their success might tell us about the significance of Kazakh music, traditions, and identity in contemporary Kazakhstan. So before I talk any further about Turan, I would like to show you what they look and sound like. This video clip that I'm going to show you comes from the ensemble's MySpace page and integrates promotional still photographs with footage from their numerous public presentations, or performances, I should say. You'll also get to see the variety of Kazakh traditional instruments played by the group members, which I'll describe in more detail in a moment. The piece that you'll hear performed is an original composition by the group. Probably get the idea. So, in their MySpace description as an ethno-folk ensemble, the Turan ensemble makes clear their recognition that they are not strictly traditional performers. The inclusion of the ethno prefix also suggests 2 possible references. First, to the self-consciously ethnic quality of their music, and second, to the fact that ensembles such as theirs used to be called ethnographic in previous decades due to their particular instrumentation and musical source materials. So even in their self-description, again, as an ethno-folk ensemble, Turan reveals their awareness of the multi-layered cultural history that they represent. We can look at Turan's image and musical style in terms of that multi-layered history, concentrating on 4 layers in particular. First, the Kazakh nomadic culture, the importation of nationalist rhetoric and musical nationalism during the Soviet period, the establishment of music conservatories in Kazakhstan, and the significance of Kazakh cultural roots in post-Soviet cultural politics. So Turan's incorporations of Kazakh nomadic history and culture begin with the instruments that they play. Although each of them possesses a unique history and set of performance conventions, they are all widely believed to have been used by Kazakh musicians for several centuries. The dombra shown here, for example, was traditionally used to accompany folk songs as well as musical battles between singing poet improvisers, called aitis. It, along with the reed flute sibizge shown here, was also used to perform instrumental music in the form of solo, quasi-improvisatory compositions called kui, and you've heard about kui from numerous presenters today. Other instruments in the ensemble, such as the two-stringed fiddle kolkobas and the plucked zither zhetigen, possess an even more potent connection to nomadic times and nomadic culture. Because of their perceived age, these two instruments in particular are described as ethnographic and serve as strong symbols of ancientness. But they each also carry an individual narrative that contributes to the visual and sonic power that they lend to the ensemble. The kolkobas is believed to have been created by the pan-Turkic figure Korkut Ata, in order to ward off death. It was traditionally used as a ritual instrument by shamanic folk healers called bakse. Meanwhile, the zhetigen is believed to have originated with a man who commemorated his 7 lost sons with each of the instrument's 7 strings. These narratives add another layer of mysticism and emotional power to the Turan ensemble's musical references to nomadic culture. I won't belabor the point with the remaining instruments, except to say that the jaw harp shenkobas is actually used by many peoples across Central Asia and around the world. The percussion instrument asatayak has similarly unclear ties to exclusively Kazakh musical history, but what's interesting about Turan's use of this instrument is that their asatayak is shaped like an image from the TAMGHALY petroglyphs, thought to represent a nomadic sun god. So actually the picture that you see in the far left of a sun-like object with a stick figure body, they actually play an asatayak, or one of these percussion instruments that's shaped like that petroglyph. Since these petroglyphs are believed to be hundreds, if not thousands of years old, they have been adopted by the Kazakh nation as powerful symbols of their own antiquity. And obviously the costumes worn by the performers also reference nomadic life. The incorporation of animal furs and various types of headgear conjure up images of Kazakh nomadic herders, hunters, warriors, and shamans. The practice of wearing this type of national clothing when performing folk music has been a long-standing practice in the Soviet sphere of influence, and just one of the many practices that came out of the Soviet aesthetic of musical nationalism. Okay. And I should also note that another nomadic reference in the Turan ensemble is, of course, to shamanism through the use of the kolkobas, through their costuming, and through various other practices that they incorporate into their performance. So that's Kazakh nomadic culture. Now on to Soviet-influenced musical nationalism. As Marina Frolova-Walker has described, the development of a national culture became a central concern in each Soviet republic starting in the 1930s. Soviet administrators saw folk songs and traditional musical genres as the ancient idiom of the newly galvanized titular nations of each republic, and nurtured the development of national musical cultures from these roots. During this process, the grafting of traditional aesthetics onto Soviet cultural policy, in Frolova-Walker's words, quote, extended the limits of what was heard as belonging to the nation, unquote. Kazakh musical forms such as kui and folk songs moved from the soloistic genres and socially intimate performance contexts and were grafted onto European-inspired classical settings such as opera and orchestras, with large numbers of performers on a public stage reflecting the prioritization of mass participation over individual expression. Cultural institutions such as music schools, theaters, folk orchestras, and radio soon followed Soviet efforts to improve infrastructure, education, and mass media in Kazakhstan. The Kazakh National Conservatory, the Kurmangazi Kazakh National Conservatory, opened in Almaty in the 1940s, where students could study either European or Kazakh music and instruments. Teaching methods in the traditional music department closely emulated those of the European music department, so that folk instrument education gradually became standardized in terms of training exercises and required repertoires, while at the same time downplaying oral tradition and the importance of improvisation. Students of Kazakh traditional music were also required to participate in the conservatory's folk orchestra and were encouraged to play in small ensembles, presumably to prepare them for their future professional options in one of the state-sponsored folk ensembles. And although state funding for folk ensembles has plummeted since the fall of communism, conservatory training still prioritizes participation in these ensembles, and as perfect evidence, Saida's video of the conservatory folk orchestra from just 3 weeks ago. So this is still a very strong priority. In addition, the conservatory served as a locus for a workshop for the improvement of instruments, where Kazakh traditional instruments underwent modifications in form and tuning to look and sound more European. All of these significant musical changes that have taken place at the conservatory have also shaped the education of its younger generations of Kazakh traditional musicians, and is perpetuated in their performance and pedagogical careers post-graduation. Since the members of the Turan Ensemble are all graduates of the conservatory, it is important to keep in mind that their formal music education has incorporated a long history of modifications to the practice of traditional music. Finally, I'd like to address how the Turan Ensemble reflects the current cultural climate of post-Soviet Kazakhstan, which has been marked by a deep concern for Kazakhs' awareness of their own cultural roots. This concern stems from a series of traumatic phases in Kazakh history during the 20th century. These include Soviet sedentarization and communalism campaigns, the starvation deaths and mass immigration of Kazakhs that resulted from these campaigns, and the importation of Russian labor in the 1950s, all of which led to the demographic and cultural Russification of Kazakhstan. As a result of these upheavals, ethnic Kazakhs became a demographic minority in their own republic until after the Soviet Union fell in 1991. At that time, the Kazakhstani government engaged in policies of what political scientist Edward Schatz has called ethnicity-based redress. This paradigm shift found expression in numerous public spaces, for example, renaming city streets after Kazakh historical figures, heavily promoting Kazakh language study, and propaganda campaigns intended to cultivate Kazakh national pride, often through musical imagery, such as the billboard shown here, which says in Russian on top and Kazakh below, the music of my land, or the music of my country. Although, unfortunately, she is shown playing the dombra the wrong way. Or some people do play it left-handed, but yes. And here's another one that I like a lot. In Kazakh, very large letters in Kazakh, smaller letters in Russian, honor and value the culture of your own people. Okay. So very, very telling propaganda around Almaty. These were all taken, these photos are from Almaty in the, around 2008. Okay, so perhaps in response to this statewide ethnic imperative, a number of Kazakh musicians in recent years have experimented with developing updated versions of Kazakh traditional music, including popular music and fusion projects, in addition to solo, traditional, and folk ensemble formats. And among these, we can include such bands as Roxanaki, Urker, Ulatau, the artist Edil Husenov, and his most recent project, The Magic of Nomads. And I think it's very interesting to point out that Edil Husenov's most recent album, again from 2008, the title, I don't know if you can read it at the top, is The Sound of Modern Kazakh Nomads, which I think is perfect for what I'm trying to talk about here. So, Turan participates in this musical discourse by continuing a familiar model of folk ensemble performance, but with the added difference of their original compositions and their youthful vitality. Additionally, in my 2008 interview with the group, they adamantly distinguished themselves from the fusion projects of other contemporary Kazakh artists by emphasizing the traditional aspects of their approach, namely their use of exclusively acoustic, not electrified, Kazakh traditional instruments, their use of Kazakh language song lyrics when they do sing, and their refusal to integrate mainstream popular music such as rock and jazz into their compositions. In these discussions, they also articulated a clear intention toward expressing not only Kazakhness, and specifically traditional Kazakhness, but cultural continuity with the entire Turkic world as well. In the first place, the word Turan refers to the historical name given to the Turkic branch of ancient Central Asian nomadic peoples, in contrast to Iran, which is the Iranian branch. The ensemble talked about their concern with reviving ancient traditions, and they described Kazakh traditional instruments as part of a larger Turkic instrumentarium, evidence of the lasting bond between present-day Turkic peoples. So in other words, those descended from the tribes of Turan. When I asked the group members to describe the overall goal of the Turan ensemble, they answered in terms of cultural revitalization. In their words, quote, "The Kazakh people, to some extent, don't know our traditions. They are forgetting. So our goal is that they, even our musicians, can know our traditions a little bit, so that they know what kind of roots they have," end quote. Therefore, they interpret their role as a form of cultural activism to remedy the forgetting that they perceive in their contemporary surroundings. As I mentioned before, the ensemble describes themselves on MySpace as an ethno-folkloric ensemble, but a brief look at the promotional materials for a recent performance in Los Angeles, California, shown here, shows that a significant amount of confusion remains regarding what type of music Turan performs and how it should be marketed. For example, this description of the ensemble from a 2011 concert advertisement uses the descriptors traditional and ancient, conveniently glossing over the complicated history behind the format presented by Turan. The group's presentation in this case strongly evokes the phenomenon described by Svetlana Boym as restorative nostalgia, which she defines as a restoration of origins which does not think of itself as nostalgia, but rather as truth and tradition. Entities or individuals employing this type of nostalgia strive to create an idealized version of the past, which simultaneously inspires pride in one's own national history and glosses over inconsistencies or untruths that would complicate this polished version of the nation's past. In the case of Turan, the element of nostalgia erases the problematic gap between pre-Soviet traditional Kazakh cultural symbols and contemporary Kazakh and foreign audiences, many of whom have little to no awareness of Kazakh musical history. However, these misperceptions have actually served the group quite well. The Turan ensemble has found a warm public reception in the 4 years since they first began performing, and that success seems to have been catalyzed by their affiliation with the National Conservatory and their inclusion in a 2009 world tour of the Conservatory's symphony orchestra, which stopped in several major cities in the US and Europe. I saw Turan perform at one of these events, as well as another Los Angeles performance in 2011 that took place in conjunction with a festival of Kazakh film at the UCLA Hammer Museum. Both of these events, it must be pointed out, were financed in part by the Kazakhstani Ministry of Education and Science and the Ministry of Culture and Information. The state promotion of Turan could therefore be interpreted as strategic, positioning the group as a showcase of young Kazakh artists who are capable of producing original music in the traditional style, but making artistic innovations while still holding firmly to their cultural roots. In her 2002 article on the Naxi ethnic minority of Lijiang, China, Helen Rees discusses a similar use of a musical ensemble to promote ethnic pride, increase international goodwill, and validate state policies regarding nationalities and culture. As she describes, the Naxi performing group that toured Britain in the late 1990s employed a strategy that she refers to as tactical Orientalism, a term borrowed from Joshua Goldstein, by which performers use particular instrumentation, staging, and costuming in order to appeal as attractive as possible to foreign audiences. Such efforts to promote particular ethnicities, traditions, and policies often produce benefits of a more tangible kind in the form of heritage industries that, in the words of Sarah Cohen, aim to bring the past to life in an entertaining manner and to contribute to local economic development, end quote. In light of these two scholarly viewpoints, Turan appears to function as a successful instrument of cultural diplomacy, while at the same time laying the foundation for growth in the cultural tourism market. This fact was driven home at Turan's 2011 performance in Los Angeles, where free copies of a publication by the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of the Republic of Kazakhstan were given away to audience members. And this publication was entitled Kazakhstan at 20, Fulfilling the Promise. The implication was clear. Turan had, whether knowingly or not, become an extension of the Kazakh Ministry of Foreign Affairs and the international public face of 21st century Kazakhstan. In conclusion, the very warm reception that Turan has received from audiences at home and abroad signals that their multi-layered ethno-folk model resonates with both Kazakhstani and foreign audiences. Turan's presentational format gives the impression of offering just the right balance between tradition and innovation. While foreigners enjoy the safe difference of their nomadic costuming and instruments, and their ancient-sounding music free of microtones or other challenging sounds, locals enjoy the ensemble's familiar ensemble format, original compositions, and the fresh energy of young performers who have turned the performance of traditional Kazakh music into an engaging and enjoyable spectacle. But their performance also demonstrates the complicated web of Kazakh cultural and identity politics in which Turan appears to participate, one in which tactical Orientalism, the heritage industry, and cultural diplomacy all vie for prominence alongside the ensemble's own artistic and cultural activist goals. Because Turan is still a young and evolving ensemble, their future creative choices and career trajectory will offer a compelling case study in the negotiation of the multi-layered Kazakh cultural legacy by a new generation of artists. Thank you.